Shalom, everybody. Shalom. You guys been enjoying Sukkot? Yes. Are you ready for it to be over? No. Of course not. Who wants it to end? But today's the last day and tomorrow's the last great day, so we better enjoy it while it lasts, right? And I can say for myself this far, I've really enjoyed this Sukkot and the level that everybody's pitched in and the love that I've seen in this camp. And it's a blessing to me to be here and to be able to serve you guys as a brother. And I thank you for this opportunity, and I hope that this message today will be what Yahweh wants me to say, and only what Yahweh wants me to say. All right, so let's get started. When I was younger, I probably would have stood here before you today and said something like, today, I'm going to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that I'm right. But is that the way we approach things? Is that the way we should approach things as a servant of Yahweh? No. I've learned over the years that it's not the best or the most righteous way to approach things. And I've learned by simply presenting the evidence with the passion and the truth and understanding of Yahweh and His words that He's placed in my heart, and presenting the evidence to prove that Yahweh is right and His word is right, not myself. So with that being said, today I want to talk about a little word that is all the rage with the kids nowadays. Faith. Belief. It almost seems like it's a frame. They just want it to be a state of mind and not a physical action. And I've learned through Scripture and seeking Yahweh's face that it is a physical action. And we have to diligently seek to trust Yahweh. Okay, so it's really simple when you start digging around. And it's a very common principle in Scripture. It has so much evidence, I could have probably written a 3-hour sermon on it and still not covered all the points and examples we have in Scripture. So today I'm going to touch on a few things that have really stood out to me in recent events in my life and people in my life and things that have happened to them. So the first scripture for the day is going to be Exodus 16. And we're going to read 1 through 30. The new ISR, that's going to be page 73. Okay. And they set out from Elam, all the congregation of the children of Israel, and came to the wilderness of Sin, which is between Elam and Sinai, on the 15th day of the second month, after their going out of the land of Mitzrayim. And the congregation of the children of Israel grumbled against Moshe and Aharon in the wilderness. And the children of Israel said to them, if only we had died by the hand of Yahweh in the land of Mitzrayim, when we sat by the pots of meat, and when we ate bread to satisfaction. You have brought us out into this wilderness to put all the assembly to death with hunger. And Yahweh said to Moshe, see, I am raining bread from the heavens for you, and the people shall go out and gather a day's portion every day, in order to try them, whether they walk in my Torah or not. Pay attention to that one. That's a very important verse, verse 4. And it shall be on the 6th day that they shall prepare what they bring in, and it shall be twice as much as they gathered daily. And Moshe and Aharon said to the children of Israel, at evening you shall know that Yahweh has brought you out of the land of Mitzrayim, and in the morning you shall see the esteem of Yahweh, and He hears your grumbling against Yahweh. And what are we that you grumble against us? And Moshe said, in that Yahweh gives you meat to eat in the evening, and in the morning bread to satisfaction. For Yahweh hears your grumbling, which you make against Him. And what are we? Your grumblings are not against us, but against Yahweh. And Moshe and Aharon say to the congregation of the children of Israel, come near before Yahweh, for He has heard your grumblings. And it came to be, as Aharon spoke to all the congregation of the children of Israel, that they looked towards the wilderness, and see, the esteem of Yahweh appeared in the cloud. And Yahweh spoke to Moshe, saying, I have heard the grumblings of the children of Israel. Speak to them, saying, between the evenings you are to eat meat, and in the morning you are to be satisfied with bread. And you shall know that I am Yahweh your Elohim. And it came to be that quail came up at evening and covered the camp. And in the morning the dew lay all around the camp. And the layer of dew went up, and see, on the surface of the wilderness was a small round substance, as fine as frost on the ground. And the children of Israel saw, And they said to each other, "What is it?" For they did not know what it was. And Moshe said to them, "It is bread which Yahweh has given you to eat. This is the word which Yahweh has commanded. Let every man gather it according to each one's need, an omer for each being, according to the number of beings. Let every man take for those who are in his tent." And the children of Israel did so and gathered, some more and some less. And they measured it by omers. And he who gathered much did not have too much, and he who gathered little did not have too little. Each one gathered according to his need. And Moshe said, "Let no one leave any of it until morning." And they did not listen to Moshe, and some of them left part of it until morning. And it bred worms and stank. And Moshe was wroth with them. And they gathered it every morning, each one according to his need. And when the sun became hot, it melted. And it came to be on the 6th day that they gathered twice as much bread, 2 omers for each one. And all the rulers of the congregation came and told Moshe. And he said to them, "This is what Yahweh has said. Tomorrow is a rest, a Shabbat set apart to Yahweh. That which you bake, bake, and that which you cook, cook. And lay up for yourselves all that is left over, to keep it until morning." And they laid it up until morning, and Moshe commanded, and it did not stink, and no worms was in it. And Moshe said, "Eat today, for today is Sabbath to Yahweh. Today you do not find it in the field. Gather in 6 days, but on the 7th day, which is the Sabbath, there is none." And it came to be that some of the people went out on the 7th day to gather, but they found none. And Yahweh said to Moshe, "How long shall you refuse to guard my commands and my Torah? See, because Yahweh has given you the Sabbath, therefore he is giving you bread for 2 days on the 6th day. And let each one stay in his place. Do not let anyone go out of his place on the 7th day." So the people rested on the 7th day. As you can see in verse 4, he tells them that they are going to gather a portion daily in order to test them to see if they walk in Yahweh's Torah or not. He was testing their faith. He promised to give them the provision daily, and that is the sum of the idea of this, is you have to trust Yahweh even if you are in a tough situation, because he will provide. That is the foundation of belief, is to simply trust the Father. It is interesting that he also says he will give them meat here as well, but it doesn't really say a whole lot outside of that. So let's look at another place where Yahweh tested them when they asked for meat to eat. And that's going to be Numbers chapter 11. And I just find it really interesting that Yahweh tells them flat out, "I'm using this to test you, to see where you stand." And that was the entire thing that Yahweh wanted from the people from the get-go. As soon as they stepped foot into the wilderness, was just for them to have faith. But you also have to take into consideration, you're in the middle of the desert. There's no water. There's no food. That's going to be a pretty trying situation to be in, to be asked to trust. And you think about how easy we have our lives, and still we have difficulty trusting Yahweh. So take that as an example that if we can't trust him now, what are we going to do when times get hard and food is scarce? Who are we going to trust to provide for us, ourselves or the Father? That's something that really has opened my eyes up and made me reconsider my faith and my walk and who I am as a man before Yahweh, because that's something that's extremely hard to do, is to have that kind of faith. So let's go on over to Numbers 11 real quick and check this out. And that's going to be page 152 in the New. Okay. And it came to be, when the people were as complainers, it was evil in the ears of Yahweh, and Yahweh heard it, and his displeasure burned, and the fire of Yahweh burned among them, and consumed those in the outskirts of the camp. And the people cried out to Moshe, and Moshe prayed to Yahweh, and the fire died down. Then he called the name of the place Taberah, because of the fire of Yahweh had burned among them. And the mixed multitude who were in the midst lusted greatly, So that the children of Israel also wept again and said, Who has given us meat to eat? We remember the fish which we ate without cost in Mitzrayim, the cucumbers, the melons, and the leeks, and the onions, and the garlic. But now our throat is dried up. There is naught to look at but this manna. Now the manna was like coriander seed, and it appeared like the appearance of bedlam. And the people went about and gathered it, and ground it on the millstone, or beat it in the mortar, and cooked it in pots, and made cakes of it. And its taste was the taste of cakes baked with oil. And when the dew fell on the camp at night, the manna fell on it. And Moshe heard the people weeping throughout their clans, each man at the door of his tent. And the displeasure of Yahweh burned exceedingly, and in the eyes of Moshe it was evil. So Moshe said to Yahweh, Why have you done evil to your servants? And why have I not found favor in your eyes to put the burden of all these people on me? Was it not I who convinced all these people? Was it not I who brought them forth? And you should say to me, Carry them in your bosom, as the foster father carries a nursing child, to the land which you swore to their fathers? Where am I to get meat to give all these people? For they weep before me, saying, Give us meat. I am unable to bear all these people alone, because the burden is too heavy for me. And if you are doing this to me, please slay me altogether, if I have found favor in your eyes, and let me not see my evil. Then Yahweh said to Moshe, Gather to me 70 men of the elders of Israel, whom you know to be the elders of the people, and officers over them, and bring them to the tent of meeting, and let them stand there with you. And I shall come down and speak with you, and shall take of the spirit that is on you, and put it on them, and they shall bear the burden of the people with you, so that you do not bear it yourself alone. And say to the people, Set yourselves apart for tomorrow, and you shall eat meat, because you have wept in the hearing of Yahweh, saying, Who has given us meat to eat? For it was well with us in Mitzrayim, and Yahweh shall give you meat, and you shall eat. You are going to eat not 1 day, not 2 days, not 5 days, nor 10 days, nor 20 days, but for a month of days, until it comes out of your nostrils, and it becomes an abomination to you, because you have rejected Yahweh, who is among you, and you have wept before him, saying, Why did we come up out of Mitzrayim? And Moshe said, The people in whose midst I am are 600,000 men on foot, and you have said, I give them to eat for a month of days. Could flocks and herds be slaughtered for them to be sufficient for them? Or could all the fish of the sea be gathered together for them to be sufficient for them? And Yahweh said to Moshe, Is the arm of Yahweh too short? Now see whether my word meets you or not. This is a good one to pay attention to also. Even Moshe was questioning the power of Yahweh here. And I see that as a lack of faith. He wasn't trusting the Father. And Yahweh even questioned Moshe, Is my arm too short that I shouldn't be able to provide for my people? So that's a really interesting thing to pay attention to. And Moshe went out and spoke to the people the words of Yahweh. And he gathered 70 men of the elders of the people and placed them around the tent. And Yahweh came down in the cloud and spoke to him, and took of the spirit that was upon him, and placed the same upon the 70 elders. And it came to be, when the spirit rested upon them, that they prophesied, but it did not continue. However, 2 men had remained in the camp. The name of one was Eldad, and the name of the other was Merdad. And the spirit rested upon them. Now, they were among those listed, but did not go out to the tent. And they prophesied in the camp. And a young man ran and informed Moshe and said, Eldad and Merdad are prophesying in the camp. And Yehoshua, son of Nun, Moshe's assistant from his youth, answered and said, Moshe, my master, forbid them. And Moshe said to him, Are you jealous for my sake? Oh, that all the people of Yahweh were prophets, and that Yahweh would put his spirit upon them. And Moshe returned to the camp, both he and the elders of Israel. And a wind went forth from Yahweh, and it brought quail from the sea, and let them fall beside the camp, a day's journey on the outside and about a day's journey on the other side, all around the camp, about 2 cubits above the surface of the ground. It's about 3 foot deep. And the people went up all day and all night and all the next day and gathered the quail. He who had least gathered 10 homers, and they spread them out for themselves all around the camp. The meat was still between their teeth before it was chewed, and the wrath of Yahweh burned against the people. And Yahweh smote the people with an exceeding great plague. Then he called the name of that place YHWH, because there they burned the people who had lusted. For YHWH the people set out from Hestroth, and they were at Hestroth. Okay. We see here that the people were complaining against Yahweh and wanting meat to eat. And in verse 31, Yahweh sent it to them. But it's important to pay attention to what he said. He told them that they weren't just going to have meat for one day. They weren't going to have meat for 10 days, not 20 days, but a month of days. So he had promised them meat for an exceeding period of time. And what did Yahweh just do with the manna? Like when he showed them, when he gave them the manna and told them what to do with the manna, what did he tell them to do? Take a daily portion, enough for each day, besides on Sabbath. So do you think when they journeyed out to the outside of the camp and the least man collected 10 homers, you think that was the daily portion? Let's see how much a homer is, just so we know, so we can have our facts exactly right on this. Okay, so I just did a simple Google search on a homer. A homer is a unit of volume used by the ancient Hebrews for liquids. 1 homer equals to 10 baths. A homer equals 220 liters. Okay, so 220 liters is how much a homer is. The conversion for liters to gallons is, a liter is 2.64 gallons. So just real quick in the calculator, do 0.264. So do 0.264 times 220 equals 58.08. That's 1 homer. So let's do times 10. 580.8 gallons of meat. The man that collected the least collected. 580.8 gallons of meat is the least that was collected by the men when they journeyed outside of the camp. So when it says that they lusted greatly, Yahweh was not bearing false witness in that. They lusted greatly. That is enough meat for an individual provision for probably a year. That is a lot of meat. So you think about it, that it says that they spread it out around the camp. It's kind of like a kid with Legos. They dump the whole block out and box out and spread it around themselves and play in it. And that's exactly what they were doing. They weren't only lusting, but they were arrogant about it. Like, look at all this meat I collected. And you know what happened? Yahweh came down and took care of them for it. But what I was getting at with going through that whole thing is to show that it's all about trust. Yahweh has always wanted us to simply to trust him and to believe that when he tells us he's going to do something for us, that it will happen, no matter how difficult or rough the way seems. And you know what? I like to look forward into the New Testament. There's a book a lot of people try to avoid, the book of Hebrews. But as Yahweh is giving me more understanding into the Word, I really do enjoy the book of Hebrews because it is a very scholarly observation of the Torah, in my opinion. And let's go to Hebrews chapter 3, starting in verse 7. Because this is going to explain what happened with the children in the wilderness. Okay, and we're going to go from verse 7. And a lot of books in the Scripture, they have chapter margins just in the wrong place. So what we're going to do today is we're going to read through Hebrews 3, and we're going to read through the end of the chapter, and then we're going to read into verse 3 into chapter 4, because it all goes together. It all flows when you read it as one piece of Scripture. So let's go ahead and switch over to Hebrews. Okay. And starting in verse 7. Therefore, as the set apart Spirit says, today, if you hear His voice, do not harden your heart as in the rebellion in the day of trial in the wilderness. What did Yahweh tell them when He gave them the manna? I'm going to try you. So the Hebrews right here is addressing what happened back in the wilderness when Yahweh tried the people. So do not harden your hearts as in the rebellion in the day of trial in the wilderness, where your fathers tried me, proved me, and saw my works 40 years. Therefore I was grieved with that generation and said, they always go astray in their hearts, and they have not known my ways. As I swore in my wrath, if they shall enter into my rest. That's referring to Psalms 95, 7 through 11. Look out, brothers, lest there be any in you of a wicked heart of unbelief in falling away from the living Elohim. But encourage one another daily while it is called today, lest any of you be hardened by the deceivableness of sin. For we have become partakers of Messiah if we hold fast the beginning of our trust firm to the end. While it is said, today, if you hear His voice, do not harden your hearts as in the rebellion. For whom, having heard, rebelled, was it not all who came out of Mitzrayim led by Moshe? And with whom was He grieved 40 years? Was it not with those who sinned, whose corpses fell in the wilderness? And to whom did He swear that they would not enter into His rest, but to those who did not obey? So we see that they were unable to enter in because of unbelief. Therefore, since a promise remains of entering into His rest, let us fear lest any of you seem to have come short of it. For indeed, the good news was brought to us as well as to them. Who is them? The people in the wilderness. That's what this whole thing has just been speaking about, the children of Israel in the wilderness. The good news was brought to them as well as to us. What's the good news? The Torah of Yahweh. But the word which they heard did not profit them, not having been mixed with belief in those who heard it. Belief, that's that word, trust right there. They didn't mix that word that they heard with trust. And without trust, the word is useless to people. If you do not trust Yahweh, the word is not going to profit you. And that's something that has always stood out to me is this verse, because it tells us what the good news is. It's not anything new. It's not something different. It's not a new doctrine. It's not a different covenant. It's the same covenant. It's always what Yahweh's wanted us to do, is to hear His voice and obey it. It's that simple. For we who have believed do enter into that rest, as He has said, as I swore in my wrath, if they shall enter into my rest. And yet His works have come into being from the foundations of the world. Exactly. It even tells us right here that His works have been from the foundations of the world. How simple is that to understand? Just listen to the Father and what He's saying to us, and you'll understand, and just believe, just trust Him. That's all He wants, is for us to surrender ourselves and our own capabilities and trust the ability of the Father and what He can do for us. Okay. So, I feel like Hebrews has a lot of good information in it. So we're going to look at Hebrews 11, because it goes through and it shows us what the substance of belief is. Instead of it just being a thought in your mind that, yeah, I really trust Yahweh, it manifests itself in the physical. And Hebrews 11 gives us a really good example of that. So let's go ahead and turn over to Hebrews 11. We're going to read 1 through 39, and this is going to be the last, most likely the last scripture for today, unless I can think of anything else off the top of my head. This is a long one, but it's worth it. It has a lot of good information in it. Okay, so Hebrews 11, 1 through 39. Belief is the substance of what is expected, the proof of what is not seen. For by this the elders obtain witness. By belief we understand that the ages were prepared by the word of Elohim, so that it was seen and was not made of what is visible. By belief Abel offered to Elohim a greater slaughter offering than Cain, through which he obtained witness that he was righteous. Elohim witnessed of his gifts, and through it, having died, he still speaks. By belief, Enoch was translated so that he was not to see death, and was not found because Elohim had translated him. For because his translation, he obtained witness that he pleased Elohim. But without belief, it is impossible to please him. For he who comes to Elohim has to believe that he is, and that he is the renewer of those who earnestly seek him. He is the renewer of those who earnestly seek him. That, just let that sink in for a second. Just earnestly seek him. That's with all your ability, all your power, everything that you have in your body, soul, and mind, you seek after Yahweh's face. Okay, so let's move on. By belief, Noah, having been warned of what was yet unseen, having feared, prepared an ark to save his house, through which he condemned the world, and became heir of the righteousness which is according to belief. By belief, Abraham obeyed when he was called to go out of the place which he was about to receive as an inheritance. And when he went out, not knowing where he was going, by belief he sojourned in the land of promise as a stranger, dwelling in tents with Yitzhak and Jacob, the heirs with him of the same promise. For he was looking for the city having foundation, whose builder and maker is Elohim. By belief, Sarah herself was able to conceive seed, and she bore a child when she was past the normal age, because she deemed him trustworthy who had promised. And so from one as good as the dead were born as numerous as the stars of the heaven, and as countless as the sands which is by the seashore. In belief all these died, not having received the promise, but seeing them from a distance, welcomed and embraced them, and confessed that they were aliens and strangers on the earth. For those who speak this way make it clear that they seek a fatherland. So I want to ask you, what inheritance are you seeking? The inheritance of this world, the inheritance of man, or the inheritance of Yahweh? What's more important to you? Because where your treasures are, so will your heart be. So I petition you today, which I believe that most people in this room are already doing it, but just to place your treasures with Yahweh, because that's the only thing that's everlasting. Everything else rots and decays. It's worthless. Okay. And yet, if they had indeed kept remembering the place which they had come out of, they would have had the chance to return. That's a powerful verse right there too to me. If you keep going back to the place that you came out of, just like Lot's wife, what happened when she looked back? She got turned into a pillar of salt, because what was behind her was way more important than what was ahead of her. And you always have to remember that. Don't look back there at all the mistakes you made or the things you may have left behind. Keep looking forward and moving forward, because the only thing you have is the future. If you're still breathing today, you still have a future left. You still have an opportunity to change all those things. But not by going back there and remembering it and dwelling on it and just hurting yourself and beating yourself up over it, but looking forward and thinking about what you can do to be a different person from this point when you make that decision. Okay. Let's see. $16? Okay, thank you. But now they long for a better place, that is a heavenly. Therefore Elohim is not ashamed to be called their Elohim, for he has prepared a city for them. By belief Abraham, when he was tried, offered up Yitzhak, and he who has received the promises offered up his only brought forth son, of whom it was said, in Yitzhak your seed shall be called. Reckon that Elohim was able to raise even from the dead, from which he received him back as a type. By belief Yitzhak blessed Jacob and Esau concerning that which was to come. By belief Jacob, when he was dying, blessed each of the sons of Joseph, and did reverence on the top of his staff. By belief Joseph, when he was dying, made mention of the outgoing of the children of Israel and gave orders concerning his bones. By belief, Moshe, having been born, was hidden 3 months by his parents, because they saw he was a comely child and were not afraid of the sovereign's command. By belief, Moshe, having become great, refused to be called the son of the daughter of Pharaoh, choosing rather to be afflicted with the people of Elohim than to enjoy the pleasures of sin for a time. Deemed the reproach of Messiah greater riches than the treasures in Mitzrayim, for he was looking to the reward. By belief, he left Mitzrayim, not fearing the wrath of the sovereign, for he was steadfast and seeking him who is invisible. By belief, he performed the Passover and the sprinkling of blood, lest he who destroyed the firstborn should touch him. By belief, they passed through the Red Sea by dry land, and when the Mitzrites tried, they were drowned. By belief, the walls of Jericho fell, having been surrounded for 7 days. By belief, Rahab the whore, who did not perish with those who did not believe, having received the spies with peace. And what more shall I say? For the time would fail me to relate of Gideon and Barak and Shimshon and Japheth, and also of David and Shemuel and the prophets, who through belief overcame reigns, worked righteousness, obtained promises, stopped the mouth of lions, quenched the power of fire, escaped the edge of the sword, out of weakness were made strong, became mighty in battle, put forth armies to flight. Women received back their dead by resurrection, and others were tortured, not accepting release, to obtain a better resurrection. And others had trials of mockings and floggings and more, of chains and imprisonments. They were stoned, they were tried, they were sawn in two, they were slain with the sword. They went about in sheepskins and goatskins, being in need, afflicted, mistreated, of whom the world was not worthy, wandering in deserts and mountains and caves and holes of the earth, and having obtained witness through the belief, all these did not receive the promise. After reading through a pretty large chunk of scripture, you can see a whole lot of people did a whole lot of things and overcame various trials and challenges simply because they believed Yahweh. Because that was the foundation of their understanding. When Abraham stepped foot out, he didn't know Yahweh. He didn't know the covenant or the Torah when Yahweh called him out into the wilderness. But through his trust and belief, he was able to step out and come out of his comfort zone. How often are we willing to step out of our comfort zone and trust Yahweh and see where he can lead us to? In our trials that we have. We all have trials and we all suffer things, but we have to be like Abraham. We have to trust Yahweh. That is the very basic beginning of honoring the Torah. Before you can ever honor the Torah and walk as a disciple of Yeshua, you have to believe Yahweh. That is the very core of everything that we do, is simply trusting the Father. I appreciate you guys letting me speak to you today, and I hope that this blessed you. And thank you.